Hello and welcome to The World Now. The U.S. and China appear to be at odds about how and when the ongoing trade war will end. Now, the Western media is also reporting the impact of the trade war on the U.S. economy.
President Donald Trump spoke at a White House dinner where he expressed optimism about the ongoing talks. He said the presidency will be able to tell in about 3 or 4 weeks whether the talks will be successful or not. It appears, however, that the Chinese government is not as positive about the ongoing talks as the U.S. presidency. Addressing journalists at a news conference, the country's foreign ministry spokesman, Geng Shuang, said he hopes the U.S. is not underestimating China's will to protect itself.
China does not want to join in the trade war, but we are not afraid of it. And if people attack our own home, then we will fight them back. Last May, China and the US had reached an agreement on economic and trade issues and made a joint statement in Washington. But then the US backed out of it a few days later. Then last December, the two sides also reached an agreement on Chinese purchases from the US. But the US raised their terms. So you absolutely can't put the art on China for reversing positions and going back on promises.
In the meantime, many U.S. industrial associations say the escalation of the China-U.S. trade friction is hurting U.S. businesses and consumers and will eventually drag down the country's economy. Tariffs hurt the heartland. The nationwide campaign, comprised of more than 150 U.S. trade organizations, released a statement on May the 5th, strongly condemning Trump's threats to raise additional tariffs on Chinese goods. The Coalition of Trade Organizations says this sudden increase with little notice will only punish U.S. farmers, businesses, and consumers. On its trade website homepage, Cribs for Kids, a Pittsburgh-based NGO which provides free or discounted cribs for low-income families, appeals to stop the trade friction because tariffs increase will force them to reduce the amount of cribs offered to people in need. Their ideas were echoed by U.S. mainstream media, which are also paying close attention to the negative impact of the intensifying trade friction. USA Today, an internationally distributed American daily, recently published an article titled, "How the Trade War with China Could Hit You: Higher Prices, Lost Jobs, and Falling Stocks," while CBS News China posted a piece titled, "China Tariff Retaliation Clobbers U.S. Stocks" on its own website. Many stories on the trade friction and its negative impact on U.S. investors and financial markets are also available on the New York Times. China and the U.S. had their 11th round of trade talks over the weekend. The Chinese top negotiator, Liu He, led the team to Washington, but that did little.
Well, now I have joining me to discuss the impact of the trade war between the U.S. and China. Global Affairs Analyst Calvin Dark joins me via Skype. Good to have you, Calvin. Now, well, China is saying that they're not even afraid of a trade war, and now there are chances that in the U.S. about 1 million jobs will be lost, and global stocks are already tumbling. Talk to us about the wider ramifications of this trade war and how far it should go.
Well, I think that question is the hardest part of this trade war because either President Trump and his administration know how far it's supposed to go and they just haven't told us, or they don't have any idea, which is not only scary, but is the exact opposite of what world markets need. I think in the U.S., the hardest part about all of this is the president can't even accept the facts that go along with what's happening. He continues to say that China is paying this money. He continues to say that we're making money on this trade war. I think he even said in one of his tweets that the war was even better than a deal would have been. But it's math. It doesn't work that way. And I think because of that, you've got a lot of people in this country who are confused, not just here in Washington or in New York, the economic capital, but in the middle of the country where they're wondering how this is going to affect them.
And now, Trump insists that China trade practices are largely unfair. And you would hear from economic experts, even in Africa, who would tell you that, look, Africa, you need to be careful about China and some of the offers they are bringing to the table. How true is it, really, that China's trade practices are largely unfair?
I think it's very true. And that's part of the reason why we're kind of in this where are we going stage in the U.S. Because even those who do not support Trump's economic policies, Democrats, for example, have long said and agree that from how China treats foreign companies to how they subsidize their own industries, stealing intellectual property, there has been a long track record where Democrats and Republicans for a long time have spoken out against these practices. So the problem now is, yes, it needs to be addressed, but is this trade war the best way to do it? And not many people think so.
You took that question right out of my mouth, exactly what I was going to ask you. This trade tariffs, are they the best way to go about it? The U.S. is putting tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods, and China is now doing a tit for tat with a 25% tariff on $60 billion worth of goods.
Yes, and the irony in all of this is that who is going to be affected the heaviest and probably the short term are a lot of people who are in President Trump's electoral base, farmers, manufacturing workers that he convinced to vote for him in 2016 because he was the world's best deal maker. And you even have Republican leaders from those states, in the Farm Belt and the industrial areas of our country who are basically saying this is going to be a little difficult now, but let's just hold on because what Trump is doing is going to help us in the long run. And a lot of Americans aren't really willing to take that risk. But for those that support Trump, they are not complaining. So he's continuing on as he is.
Right, Calvin Dark, Global Affairs Analyst. Thank you so much for joining us on The World Now.
Thank you.